One of the grave misunderstandings about teaching is just how much time it requires and what that time consists of. The especially naive among prospective educators believe it to be strictly white-collar profession, wherein teachers arrive to their classrooms at 7 o'clock and leave at 3 o'clock after spending a day dispensing their knowledge unto the youth assigned to them all day. Slightly more informed and realistic people realize the amount of time that goes into grading papers, homework, projects, and understand that a teacher must often take work home with him or her. What the vast majority don't realize, however, is that's only the tip of the iceberg, especially if you're just getting started with your career as a teacher or teaching a new subject. I've been teaching for over 4 years now, and this year I'm teaching 2 new classes at 2 new grade levels in a new school district. I've been going to the school an average of 11 hours a day, and the sport that I coach hasn't even started yet. So where does the time go? Many don't realize the time, essential nature, and complexity of lesson plans that teachers are required to produce. It's worth mentioning that the intensity of this and other requirements vary circumstantially with the state, district, school board, and individual accreditation status of your school. If your school students have holistically performed well on standardized tests for the last several years, you probably will have less intense paperwork to attend to than a school whose test scores have been waning and lacking full accreditation, which is based on such things. Now, regardless, you may hold ample knowledge about your content area. You may even be able to teach and lecture about this subject just out of your head with nothing but a post-it note or some kind of notes to keep key points that you cover throughout the day. But that still doesn't exempt you from creating a detailed lesson plan for administrators to observe and critique. The lesson plan format is most likely completely out of your hands as well, and is designed to be administrator-friendly, not teacher or student-friendly. Teachers can almost always teach out of their heads, and I've never met one who actually teaches every lesson by following some printed lesson plan on the podium. Due to the nature of the profession, that plan will never fit the times allotted and will always include some kind of changes, because that's just what happens when you're teaching. Not everything goes the way you schedule it to. But you still need to have a detailed lesson plan typed out and submitted on time. These always include the objective agenda, assessments, materials, but could also include a wide gamut of more abstract things such as the essential questions, independent and guided practice, what accommodations you intend to make for students with special needs, differentiated instruction plans, homework, and more. As I alluded to, you sometimes need to plan almost entirely different lessons and assessments for those students with IEPs, 504s, physical, mental limitations, and English language learners. These things are difficult, but not impossible. Even though they come more naturally with experience, they still take a great deal of time. Apart from what's included in a lesson plan that you may have to type daily or type a series of weekly, creation of your class materials also takes time. Anyone can run off copies from a workbook made by a textbook company, but any quality teacher knows that usually works as more of a sedative than a learning tool. Rubrics, projects, active and creative assignments are mainstays in the quality classroom these days. If the technology like a Promethean or Smartboard, computers, etc. are available, a teacher needs to create lessons and activities that get students using them and get a hands-on experience with those sort of things. If the technology isn't there, a teacher needs to find a way to simulate it so that his or her students don't fall behind those students from more affluent districts. The days of sitting at a big desk and grading worksheets or planning the next day's lesson while the entire class quietly reads a story and answers questions at the end or does problems on a worksheet, those are past. Any teacher still teaching that way is as obsolete as a mechanic who doesn't believe in running a computer-based vehicle diagnostic. While many teachers, especially those in block or period schedule, have some kind of planning time allotted to them, not all do, those who do have it rapidly filled with other duties: hall monitoring, class coverage, meetings and professional development, parent conferencing and phone calls, filling out logs of those contacts along with students' behavioral issues. Many of these things tend to spill over into the after-school time as well. There are varying frequencies of department meetings and faculty meetings which go on at varying lengths and rates of productivity. You also need to attend and document individual education plan meetings and English language learner meetings for students who qualify for those services. You may need to communicate with counselors and administrators about unruly students to get to the bottom of behavioral issues, documenting everything along the way. Contrary to popular belief, classroom management involves more than just sending misbehaving students to a principal who will wave a magic wand and fix the problem for you. You're also expected to stay well read on current trends in public education and to produce research of data-driven instructional practices. Additionally, teachers are still responsible for kids who don't even come to their class. Well, you as a teacher obviously have no direct control over how many times a student actually shows up in your room. You are accountable for how well they perform on the test at the end of the course, regardless. I've even been scolded by administration for a student coming late to school and missing my first block frequently because I obviously wasn't trying hard enough to make my class a place that student wanted to be. This challenge includes students who regularly miss multiple days of instruction every week. It's your job to get them caught up and to set them up for success. Teachers need to create meaningful alternative assignments to ensure that students who were absent of the days covering essential new information get caught up without having to reteach the whole class. States also mandate that every child have access to public education, even if they can't physically make it to your room. Such students with major illnesses, pregnancy, and so forth are put on homebound. That means you will have students on your roll whose scores you are held accountable for, who may never show up on your roll until several weeks into the school year and you never actually see in person once. They have a homebound teacher, which is assigned to them. It's basically a substitute whose expertise may have nothing to do with your class. Now, homebound teachers are responsible for taking work you assign to the student and bringing it back to you to grade and helping the student understand to the best of their abilities. Needless to say, if you want that student to stand a chance, it takes more than just sending copies of pre-canned worksheets and reading assignments. You have to create entirely different lessons and activities that correspond to them, because they aren't in your class to learn all of what you go over on a daily basis, and their homebound teacher only has so much time before they have to move on to the next homebound student. As if this weren't enough, most teachers need to find some extracurricular activity to devote their time to in the interest of preserving a semblance of job security beyond just having students who produce high test scores. They have to sponsor a club, coach a sport, serve on a committee. Most of these things require them to organize some form of fundraising, which eats up further time to compensate for the lack of funds in public education. You'll likely be asked or required to work with the gate or concession stands at sporting events and other extracurriculars, and to chaperone class trips and dances, and to offer after-school tutoring. You're highly unlikely to be financially compensated for doing so. In addition to what's mentioned here comes mountains of paperwork and evidence for your completion of these requirements, and usually some kind of professional development plan you have to regularly manage and update to show your progress as an educator. The important thing to take from this is an understanding that teaching isn't what it used to be and what many imagine it to be. You don't just walk into a room for 40 hours a week, handing out reading assignments, lecturing on a whim, and sitting at your desk while you prepare to punch the clock and leave at 3 o'clock. Your summers off include studying and mapping curriculum for next year, attending workshops for some classes, all the while not getting paid until the next school year starts again. You can put in 11 hours or more a day as a teacher and still leave knowing that you could have gotten more done if you stayed longer, particularly at the start of your career. Even if teaching itself is something that you love to do, it's only a fraction of what the job requires. Reasoning that you would love to be a teacher because you love to teach is just like saying you would love to be a doctor because you take pleasure from delivering good news about a patient's health status. It's a job that your employer can't afford to pay you by the hour for, and it will take every ounce of energy you have if you let it, and still beg you for more. If you're not ready to put that kind of time into your work days, you may want to consider one of the many degree-holding work fields that pays higher in proportion to the quantity and quality of work hours than teaching does.